The Children and Nature Network is concerned about how children are increasingly disconnected from nature. This is Switzer Network News.
If you think about your own childhood, or most adults think about their childhood, there were plenty of moments when you slipped outside, away from the watchful gaze of your parents, and messed around out in nature. Maybe you had a fort with your friends, or maybe you played silly games at night, or just hung out by yourself and looked at ants or birds. Maybe you got even into a little bit of trouble. But somehow in that process, you were engaging with the natural world and learning about it and about yourself. If you contrast that now with kids today, there's some remarkable differences. And it's almost like the culture of childhood has been changing little by little over the last 20 or 30 years, and we wake up one day and realize it's quite different from what it was.
Children today often have very structured lives, classes and clubs and sports.
Kids are plugged in electronically, and that's a huge issue. A recent study has suggested that kids ages 8 to 18 spend 7.5 hours a day plugged into different electronic media. And then there are places where going outside just doesn't feel as safe as it used to feel. Maybe there aren't the green spaces there were, but even what's there, parents feel like the kids need to stay in the house to be safe. So the Children and Nature Network formed after its co-founder, Richard Louv, who's a journalist, wrote a book called Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. And nature deficit disorder is just a term he came up with to describe what's happening with kids who aren't spending time outdoors. And he surmised that some of the maladies affecting children today might in fact be correlated with this lack of time in nature.
And the results being observed include childhood obesity, attention deficit disorder, and what Louv suggests is a culture of depression among children.
There's a very positive flip side to all of this, which is that by activating time in nature for kids, we can actually positively address all of these kinds of concerns. Basically, that's why the Children and Nature Network formed. One really interesting example that's coming out with the pediatric community, it comes from Holland, Michigan, where pediatricians there now prescribe time in nature at well-child visits. And they do a interview with the kids and ask how much time they spend watching TV and do you get outside much. And at the end of the meeting, if they don't think that child is outside enough, they will tell the parents, in addition to vitamins and coming in next year, make sure your kid's outside for about an hour a day. They consider it that important. One of the things that's interesting as you think about connecting kids to nature is that it doesn't mean you have to go for a long backpacking trip in Yellowstone. And a big emphasis of the movement is on nearby nature. There's parks nearby, but even if you go outside and see birds in the tree overhead, that's the natural world. It's what we live in, and it's almost about paying attention to its existence right around us. Think about a young mother with an infant and a toddler, and she wants to go hiking. It's actually quite understandable why she might feel a little vulnerable out on a trail. So one wonderful thing that's developed in the recent years has been this idea of family nature clubs. And dozens have formed, even just in the last couple of years, partly facilitated by the Children and Nature Network, where families meet up on a regular basis, they go on a trail together, and there's that freedom, and yet you're out there together, and so community builds around that. My own role with the Children and Nature Network has been to help provide tools to caregivers who want to spend time in nature with their kids, but for some reason or another aren't quite prepared about how to do so. It may be hard to imagine, but parents are a little concerned about taking their kids outside and not knowing what to do. I think that may stem from these overstructured lives. They're afraid that their 10-year-old is going to say, I'm bored, why am I here, what do I do next? So I've been giving caregivers simple little tools, just little ideas like go to the hardware store and get a paint chip with the different colors on the strip and give it to your 4-year-old and have them look for those colors on the hiking trail when you're out. I have a special interest that I bring to all of this, which is the role of stories and how we relate to the natural world. It's really quite simple in that if we have time spent in nature, we have stories to tell about what we've done. When I was in high school, my friends and I would meet up at this one tree, and one time somebody spilled the beans about something going on in her life, And we decided to call the tree of secrets, where everything private becomes public, at least to our little group. That lore became part of our lives, and that tree became part of our lives, and I think a special way once we had the stories to tell about it. And in a similar way, there's a cabin that my husband's family has up in Minnesota. And I love to tell my girls about the time I went up to the end of the dock and said, I think if I'm really still and quiet right now and watch this heron across the water, I'm going to see something fascinating. Well, a few minutes later, my husband padded down quietly to the end of the dock, looked at the heron, and then waved quietly to the other direction, where a pair of little mink were gambling along on the edge of the water, in and out. I'd never seen them in my life before. I was so amazed. Now that we tell that story, every time my girls go to the cabin, they sit quietly on the edge of the dock, waiting to see if there's the possibility for mink or something else. I actually saw a beaver there this summer. So I think that hearing and telling stories about the places we live is part of the cultural change of reconnecting to nature. Prior to having this project with the Children in Nature Network, I edited a book series called Stories from Where We Live. And each book in the series is an anthology of a different ecoregion of the country. And the idea is that different people over time and places writing stories or memoir or poetry about a place is chronicling our relationship and the many ways we can connect to nature. I don't think we can have an agenda about what happens with children, what they take away from it, what they experience. It's almost, you create an opportunity, you create access, and then you see what happens. Having said that, I think our only hope for the long-term protection of places and our planet is that people in their childhood and in their lives have had an opportunity to engage for themselves and see why they should care.
For more information about this topic, please visit our website. This is Switzer Network News.